Before the guns, there was silence, a comfortable, deceiving silence. The year was 1914, and Europe stood at the height of its power, its empires stretching across every continent, its cities glittering with gas lamps and new electric light, its people drunk on progress. Steam engines crossed mountains, telegraphs connected continents. Scientists split the atom and dreamed of a future without limits. The great powers, Britain, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia, had not fought a major war in nearly a century. They traded with each other. Their royal families were cousins. Many believed war between civilized nations had become impossible. They were wrong. Beneath the polished surface of the Belle Époque, the beautiful era, old wounds festered. Empires competed for colonies. Nationalism burned in the hearts of peoples who longed to be free. Alliances formed in secret, binding nations to one another like a web of tripwires. And in the summer of 1914, someone pulled the thread. Sarajevo, June 28, 1914. A city of cobblestones and cafes, of Ottoman minarets in Austro-Hungarian grandeur. The Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, rode through its streets in an open motorcade. He had come on a goodwill visit. He would not return. A 19-year-old Bosnian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip stood on the corner of a narrow street. In his pocket, a pistol. In his heart, a burning hatred for the empire that ruled his people. When the Archduke's car made a wrong turn and stalled just meters away, Princip stepped forward. 2 shots rang out. The Archduke and his wife Sophie slumped in the back seat, bleeding. By noon, they were dead. The world did not yet know it. But those 2 bullets had just ignited the fuse of the deadliest conflict in human history. Within 6 weeks of those 2 shots in Sarajevo, the great powers of Europe had declared war on each other. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia and issued an ultimatum so harsh it was designed to be rejected. Serbia refused. Austria declared war. Russia mobilized to defend Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia, then on France. When German troops marched into neutral Belgium to outflank the French, Britain declared war on Germany. In the span of 37 days, the web of alliances had transformed a regional assassination into a continental catastrophe. Millions of young men, cheering and waving flags, boarded trains to the front. They believed it would be over by Christmas. They were tragically, catastrophically wrong. They called it the Western Front, a jagged scar stretching nearly 700 kilometers from the English Channel to the Swiss border. By late 1914, both sides had dug in. Literally, hundreds of thousands of soldiers burrowed into the earth, constructing a labyrinth of trenches that would become their home, their prison, and for many, their grave. Life in the trenches was a slow, grinding horror. Men stood knee-deep in mud and water. Rats the size of cats fed on the dead. The stench of decay was everywhere. Above the parapet, no man's land, a wasteland of shell craters, barbed wire, and unburied bodies. Soldiers would spend weeks in these trenches, enduring artillery bombardments that could last for days without pause. Shell shock, what we now call PTSD, shattered the minds of hundreds of thousands. And yet they held the line. Day after day, week after week, year after year. The Western Front barely moved. Thousands of lives were traded for a few hundred meters of mud. The Great War introduced the world to weapons it had never imagined. Poison gas, first deployed by Germany at Ypres in April 1915, was perhaps the most feared. Chlorine and mustard gas drifted across no man's land in yellow-green clouds, burning the eyes, blistering the skin, and destroying the lungs of anyone caught without a mask. Men drowned in their own fluids. Then came the tank, a British invention. first used on the Somme in 1916. These lumbering steel beasts could crush barbed wire and cross trenches, offering a new way to break the stalemate. High above the mud, a new kind of warrior emerged, the fighter pilot. Men like the Red Baron became legends, dueling in biplanes over the trenches below. Aerial reconnaissance changed warfare forever. By the end of the war, aircraft had become weapons of strategic bombing. Technology, once the pride of civilization, had become its most efficient instrument of death. While men died in the trenches, the world behind the front lines was transformed forever. Women who had never worked in factories before now operated lathes, filled artillery shells, drove ambulances, and managed farms. In Britain alone, nearly 1 million women entered the workforce during the war years. They proved, beyond any argument, that they were the equals of men in industry and endurance. Governments deployed propaganda on a scale never seen before. Posters urged young men to enlist, painted the enemy as monsters, and rallied civilians to sacrifice. Rationing became a way of life. Sugar, meat, bread, all were controlled. Entire economies were reorganized for one purpose: to feed the war machine. Children collected scrap metal. Families tended victory gardens. The home front was not a refuge from the war. It was part of the war. By 1917, the war had ground both sides to near exhaustion. Russia, torn apart by revolution, collapsed and signed a separate peace with Germany. But from across the Atlantic came new hope and new power. The United States, under President Woodrow Wilson, had tried to stay neutral. But German submarines were sinking American ships, and a secret German telegram proposed a military alliance with Mexico against the United States. In April 1917, America entered the war. Fresh troops, fresh supplies, and fresh morale flooded into France. Meanwhile, the Allies launched the 100 Days Offensive in August 1918, a relentless coordinated assault that finally broke the German lines. For the first time in 4 years, the front began to move. Germany's allies collapsed one by one. Revolution spread within Germany itself. The Kaiser abdicated. The end was near. At 11 o'clock on the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, the guns fell silent. After 4 years, 3 months and 14 days of unrelenting slaughter, the armistice was signed. Soldiers on both sides climbed out of their trenches and stood in the sudden, overwhelming quiet. Some wept. Some laughed. Some simply stood and stared at the sky, unable to believe the noise had stopped. The silence after 4 years of thunder must have been the strangest sound in the world. In towns and cities across the Allied nations, people poured into the streets dancing and embracing strangers. But in the trenches, among the men who had lived through it, there was something more complex than celebration. There was grief. There was relief. There was the unbearable weight of memory. And there was the knowledge that for millions of their comrades, the silence had come too late. The war was over, but the world it left behind was shattered beyond recognition. In June 1919, the victorious powers gathered at the Palace of Versailles outside Paris. The treaty they produced was meant to ensure peace forever. Instead, it planted the seeds of an even greater catastrophe. Germany was stripped of its territories, its military, and its dignity. It was forced to accept sole responsibility for the war, the infamous war guilt clause, and to pay crippling reparations that would devastate its economy for decades. The Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires were dissolved. New nations were carved from their ruins. The map of the world was redrawn. 20 million people had died. 21 million more were wounded. An entire generation of young men had been consumed. The Great War, they called it. the war to end all wars, but the humiliation of Germany, the resentment that burned in its people, and the economic despair that followed would give rise, within 20 years, to Adolf Hitler and the Second World War. The guns had fallen silent, but the echo of their thunder would shake the world for generations to come.